Okay, so start with the reading. I'll have my editor edit this specifically, but go on with that first.
Okay. I notice a lot. I observe and feel the energy of the room. I can perceive the inner landscape of someone's pain. Most of the time, I keep my observations to myself. But it feels like time I share some of what I see in hopes that this message can be delivered to the right people and changes can be made to support the well-being of all of us. Many of these insights come from my work as a substitute teacher in the public education system. We are all hungry for presence, especially the kids. We are starving for connection to first and foremost our own body, to others and to the earth. We ache to know the safety of the present moment. But we can't focus because our minds have been disrupted and distorted by the influence of the media. The constant distractions mask the hungry ghosts inside of us. We've lost touch with reality, and we've become excellent escape artists. We have become weak in so many ways. We fear the slightest bit of pain, whether that be physical exertion from a run or something as simple as focusing our own minds to write a paragraph. We can't seem to read more than one page or two before our minds betray us. When things get hard, we give up because instant gratification is all our nervous system knows. We feel like slaves to our own bodies, and we chase the high more than any generation ever has before. The problem is we don't know where to look other than our screens, and we have so much energy pulsing through our bodies at every given moment. We have so much creative life force ready to be channeled into the creation of our new earth. We were made for these times, but you make us sit in those cages that you call desks and force us to learn what happened in the past. You feed us dead trees with bleeding ink and call it a lesson. We waste time studying things that our phones can give us the answer to in an instant. It's painful because we know we were made for so much more. When we refuse, you bribe us with sugar and more screen time because you don't know what to do with us. You've given up on us and we can feel it. We hear you whispering about how we have ADHD and so many other undiagnosed things with the other teachers. You've lost your mind and you don't know what to do with us. We can feel it. Most days we feel like a lost cause, a hole in your heart. And we continue to suffer and fidget. We have become masters at fidgeting. Is there an honors award for that, we wonder? If so, it's all we feel capable of achieving. All the while, our blood sugar levels are through the roof. Little do we know that our bodies perceive this extreme blood sugar imbalance as a trauma response, and fight, flight, freeze is induced nonstop in our little bodies. You wonder why we get angry all the time, why we can't sit still, why we throw desks and punch kids, or why we hide in our hoods with our faces pressed into our desks, because our bellies haven't been filled with anything other than sugar in months. We don't know what it feels like to be full, to be nourished, to be present, to be fed with food, hope, and love. You need to teach us. You need to be our role model. You need to believe in us because things need to change. Signed, the kids.
And you wrote that from your experience witnessing these things in school.
Yeah, in the public education system.
Tell us what you witnessed.
Tell us what I witnessed?
Yeah, I'm curious, like, these things that came out in your writing, what do you witness when you're in these classrooms? What do you see?
I see a lot of energy, a lot of trapped energy with nowhere to go, a lot of excitement and overactive nervous systems. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's really suppressed, the energy. And a lot of just kind of dulling the life force, dulling creativity, dulling the movement of the body. And a big focus on educating the mind.
And now tell us where you're from. Where do you work? What's your story there?
I'm from Penticton, BC. So it's a small town in southern British Columbia, Canada. And I've been a teacher for 5 years. And I'm also a certified breathwork practitioner and an Ayurvedic health and wellness coach. So I work with a lot of different people. I work with the community as well as in the school district. And I've never really felt like I've fit in fully in the school district. So right now I'm working as an on-call teacher, so a substitute teacher. So I go in and I fill in from kindergarten to grade 8. So there's quite a wide range of classes that I teach.
And then we're gonna edit this part out, but could you get headphones after all? Is it possible? There's something going on with your voice that's going in and out.
Is there? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think I do have headphones right here. Let's see. Okay. Okay, how does that sound?
Okay, so far that's so much better. So let's start there. So I'm going to just have you reintroduce yourself. So I'm here with Devie Rose, and I want to know, tell us a little bit about where you come from and what you do.
Okay, thanks, Luis. Right now, I am a teacher. I live in Penticton, British Columbia, Canada. So it's a small town in southern BC. And I've been a teacher for 5 years. And I'm also a teacher of Ayurveda and a certified breathwork practitioner. So I work with a wide variety of ages in the community. And I facilitate wellness workshops, Ayurvedic cleanses. I hold space for transformational breathwork sessions. And I'm also a substitute teacher right now in the public education system.
Beautiful. I'm curious, I wanted to have you on because I was, I think you interviewed me for a recording for schools. Is that right? Just for educators.
Mhm.
And in our conversation, we were really talking about, there's so many things we were talking about, but the basis was how trauma uninformed public education is. And
Yes.
what I call like the latent results of colonization and how they show up in the school system. So just kind of starting like riffing on that with me.
Mhm.
What's the
Mhm.
first what's the most prominent way you see that being expressed in the public school system? Not to put anyone down, but just to like bring some
No.
clarity to this subject.
Absolutely. Yeah, not to bring anybody down, no matter what I say, it's all coming from a place of love and just an observation. But I think it's just really the definition of trauma is not widely understood. I still find that the teachers that I work with still think of it as a very big event. A very traumatic event, abuse, sexual abuse, death, war, famine, those big life events. And they're not understanding how the day in and day out micro traumas can really affect our students and the learning, as well as how the even environment of certain classrooms can really be inducing trauma every single day.
That's right. And tell us what you've seen with the environment that could counter some of the effects that might increase the charge in a child's body, which we'll talk about as well so people understand what these words mean. But how have you found
Absolutely.
ways to counteract that? I'm curious.
I think it's really important to just start with a neutral environment. So earthy tones in the classroom, simplify everything. So keep the walls, clean and clear, have some students' artwork and a few important things, but not covered fully. Because I often see there's words all over these classroom walls, and these kiddos don't even know how to read yet. They're
Mhm.
5, 6, 7 years old, and there's posters with motivational speeches on them and this and that. And so I think it can be really overwhelming. So just keeping things really simple. And I often see there's a daily schedule we often have on our boards, which is awesome because the kids need to know what's coming. It gives them preparation. They know what to expect. But when our day is 6 hours long and there's 20 things to get through, I think it can be really overwhelming. So just sort of tightening it down to maybe 5 or 6 different things and taking it down. I've also seen some teachers where as soon as we accomplish math, we take that sticker off the board. That's done,
Mm.
that's complete. We can kind of let go of that.
Mhm.
Um, and then also just having proper snacks for the kids. And I notice a lot of high carb, high sugar offerings. Often we have these wonderful breakfast programs, which is fantastic that we're able to offer a hot breakfast and a hot lunch for these kids. But, it's just toast and jam and fruit and just things that are really going to spike our blood sugar and induce that adrenalized state in the body. So I think it would be really valuable for teachers to have a more of a balanced whole food meal with some heavier proteins and some fats and things to keep us more stable throughout the day, as well as giving students permission to eat when they need to.
When you're saying all that, I'm thinking of a couple things. The two pieces that come up for me are co-regulation and capacity building. And I think because we're such a mind-oriented society, we forget that the body is actually where we learn from. That we don't actually learn from the mind, we learn from the body and the nervous system. That's what retains what we learn. So I wonder about how do you, and I guess I'll say just for a moment for people listening, when I'm talking about capacity, I'm talking about the physical space in the nervous system to take in information without getting overwhelmed. And what I find so challenging in a public school system compared to a smaller private school is how do you show up to that uniqueness in capacity? Because capacity isn't one rule kind of a thing. Each body has a different capacity based on their home life, the morning, how they woke up, what they're eating. I mean, it changes day to day. What's that like for you as a teacher to like observe capacity, and how are you able or unable to respond to it?
Yeah, that's a great point, Luis. It's very, very challenging. There's so much diversity, especially when our classrooms have 25 to 30 students. So there's such a wide spectrum. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it is so challenging to get concepts across. I think that there always needs to be sort of they call it a low floor and a high ceiling. So lots of different entry points for the kids to jump in where they have that capacity. So just starting really, really small and maybe sitting in the carpet and really starting with a concept that everybody can get, right? And maybe, having them work with a partner side by side to share some ideas so they feel successful, and then building up from that. But that is very, very challenging to accomplish. And there is lots of times where kids come to school and they're so dysregulated that, learning is not possible. And the whole day is spent just in regulation mode. So, and there's a lot of support workers, we call them education assistants here in the district. And it's actually really interesting. I was just at a trauma-informed educational workshop last Friday, and I was hoping and expecting there would be lots and lots of teachers, but it was all the support workers that came. So that was really interesting, but it also made sense because they're the ones that are dealing with those students that are the most dysregulated.
That interests me because I first of all, I love that you have that. I don't know if we have that in the States. It's been a long time since I don't know, since I was in school. And so that was like 18 years ago. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking so much of you and the teacher right now. I'm thinking of the nervous system of the teacher to be able to create a safe space in the classroom. The teacher themselves has to have such capacity to be able to relate and self-regulate while the children are dysregulated. So as you're saying this, I'm curious, how do you personally hold on to yourself when you have 30 kids and you have a specific amount of time in each class and you have specific things you have to handle and get to in the amount of time? How do you deal with that? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's definitely a big challenge. I'm really grateful for all of my practices, for things like Ayurveda and breathwork and yoga that have come into my life at the right time, because my nervous system was very fried growing up. And in my early 20s, I was dealing with some health issues myself. So I didn't have much capacity. But I definitely do make sure that I wake up really early, 2 to 3 hours before I have to be anywhere. And I do some breath work in the morning. I make sure I have a really nourishing breakfast. I've got all my snacks and lunch prepared, so I know what to expect throughout the day. And I often take myself out for a walk at the different breaks. I have a walk. Sometimes I even close my eyes for a little bit after lunch.
to keep myself regulated and to give myself some space from the building of the school, because I find that nature is such a powerful co-regulator. So if I can get myself out there and kind of clear the air, then I can be more focused and functional when I come back to the classroom.
I love that. It warms my heart to know, how much you do for yourself so you can give that to the children. And I think anyone listening who either had negative experiences as a student growing up, or is a teacher and trying to hold that space, or any kind of facilitator or leader trying to hold some kind of space, I feel like the number one piece is the space in yourself first. And then it's like
Mm-hmm.
witnessing the space that the others need. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what interests me about that, I speak a lot about the conditioning, again, the innocent, mostly unconscious conditioning that happens in school, in the first, especially those first early grades, where the children are constantly being told to sit still and constantly being rewarded for doing what the teacher wants them to do, and holding in their bladder until it's time to go to the bathroom. And for me, it kind of nurtures that fawning response at a really early age. And then we start rewarding ourselves for the ability to control our bodies versus relate to our bodies. And I wonder how
Mm-hmm.
you contend with that, being in a school system that isn't completely understanding that element. Like, what do you do with that?
Absolutely. It's really hard for me to be in this position, because the system is like you said, designed to control our bodies. And I've been through the whole spectrum where I've had to control my body for so long. I think I mentioned when I interviewed you that even when I was learning to become a teacher and a practicum student getting observed, like I didn't even feel like I could ask to go to the bathroom because it wasn't the appropriate time. So I think that conditioning is still very prevalent. And it's very challenging when you're kind of the black sheep, where I'm kind of the one, and I don't have my own classroom at this moment. So it's kind of difficult where I don't have that control as much to make these changes. But I think that it really does come down to the teacher. So just coming down to how much do I listen to my body? And then I'm going to give the students and whoever I'm working with that permission. So, yeah, I'll often tell the kids, if you're hungry, if you didn't get a chance to have breakfast, if you can't wait until 10:30 for our first break, please have a snack, and they go, really? What? You're going to let me have a snack? They think it's Christmas. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, of course you can have a snack. Please have a snack if your body's hungry. Like,
Mm.
you're not going to be able to learn unless you feel full and satisfied and have the right fuel. So we're feeding our brains, we're watering our brains, we need to hydrate. So um and if you do need to go to the bathroom, it's okay to go. And I definitely see kids abusing some of those privileges too, where they do just want to sneak out every half an hour to get a bit of a break, but sometimes they need it too at the same time. So I
I'm
think
glad you
it's
just said that part. I was going to ask you about that. Like when you said like and sometimes they need it. I'm thinking of myself, and I would have loved throughout the classrooms to be able to walk into the hallway for 2 minutes and be alone, and then go back, because that's how I would have self-regulated and created some space. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
what we can see as like bad behavior or a bad student. It's really just a student whose body is needing some kind of capacity building. I mean, would you agree with that, or where
I
do
would
you
agree
go?
with that. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just I like somebody once said, it's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking.
Mhm.
So I really do believe that they're just searching for that connection. Maybe that's a connection to their own body, maybe that's a
Mm.
connection to the teacher, to to the earth, something else, but they're seeking that connection. They're not able to regulate themselves. That's why they're fidgety and moving and wiggly and loud and aggressive, just because they've got some energy that needs to be settled.
That's right.
And often they don't have those role models or those figures at home to regulate them. So they might not even know what regulation feels like.
The more I do this work and I teach courses and I do workshops and things, at the end of every one, someone ends up saying, gosh, I wish this was taught in school. Because so many children, I mean, if we think about ourselves as individuals, any of you as parents or not parents, as human beings, it's like most of us, until we do this work, we don't even know what self-regulation means. We don't even know it's an
Mhm,
option. It's like we know how to
mhm,
soothe, but we don't know how to self-relate and find safety in ourselves. And then when we
mhm,
practice it, we start learning. But these children coming to school are most likely coming from families that have no languaging or practice around this idea of self-relating and finding safety in the self. And I find that so important because they're going to school. Some kids at 2 or 3, if it's preschool, they're starting right away, and they're in that system 5 days a week, 8 to 9 hours a day for the next 12, 13, 14 years. It's a lot. That's their entire development as children and teenagers.
mhm,
So it's like how they're developing. I mean, they're going into the world then, right, as adults, and to have a system in place in school that actually teaches self-relation through, like the way you're doing it, through mirroring of the teacher themselves, I just feel like is
mhm,
almost more valuable than even what we're learning in school.
mhm. Absolutely, because if you can't be regulated in oneself, if you don't know what it feels like to be safe, it's very challenging to show up to the world, right? To offer anything to
Yes.
the world when we're just struggling to find that safety, that balance, that presence within our own bodies. It's very hard to create and give anything in the world. So I think that you've got that bang on, that it really is the foundational skills. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to go into it because, like you mentioned, the word self-regulation gets thrown around a lot. You know, there's a lot of social and emotional learning going on, which is awesome. I love to see that, right? There's programs called the zones of regulation where we teach kids how to notice what zone they're in, what emotion they're feeling. You know, are they feeling sad? Are they in the blue zone? Are they feeling angry and aggressive in the red zone? Are they feeling excited in the yellow zone? And different strategies. But at the same time, sometimes they don't know how to do that on their own, or
Mhm.
it's more of a mental process. Again, you know, if I'm
Mhm.
in this zone, I take 3 deep breaths, but
Mhm.
is it really working?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
so I think that there still needs to be some work within understanding the body and that self-relating that you mentioned and really feeling it
Mm.
somatically.
It's such a radical concept to self-relate, because it's like if I love a part of myself, it's very easy to relate to that part of myself. But how many parts of ourselves do we not like, or how many parts of ourselves come in uninvited that we don't even ask for? And
Mhm,
those need relating even more than the parts that we celebrate. So when you're talking about these zones, which I love as a first step, being
mhm,
able to say
mhm,
like, oh, I'm going into blue or red or yellow or green, it's like, well, what are the early sensational stages and signals that tell you you're going into anger? And then instead of like breathing away the anger, what's it like to breathe into the anger and actually listen to the anger? What's the anger saying? Is it saying I'm hungry? Is it saying I want to run? Is it saying my parents got in an argument? Like, what's the anger saying to you?
mhm,
And I find it with adults as well. There's this societal kind of cultural leaning toward identifying the emotion so you can control it. And it's a very, like, again, psychologically, it's a very colonizing practice of, there's
mhm,
this thing I don't like, there's this part of me, or some being in me that I don't agree with or like or understand. So I have to find a way to control it and dominate it. And then, as we know, it just puts it into some shadow where it grows. And
mhm,
we see this with children so easily because they're so
mhm.
somatic, and they'll scream and they'll yell and they'll spit and they'll throw. So we see that kind of like repressing it does nothing. So I wonder if you have any experience, or if there's just no space for it yet, in your system of education, your experience in education, where you're actually able to teach children how to relate to the anger and sadness.
Mm. I love that, Luis. I think that that's so valuable and so important. I think you just wrote a post about that. I just saw on Instagram about, yeah, just really accepting whatever that charge is, whatever that sensation is, whatever that emotion is where we don't need to do a practice to get rid of it. We can learn to be with it. And I think that that is such a new concept for
Yeah.
society as a whole that I don't think that's ever been taught or practiced. You know, that just sparks an idea in my mind of, oh, I'm going to try that next time and actually see what that could look like, because
Mm.
I've never really thought of it that way. Um, I mean, there's definitely some books that talk about, meditation, and our thoughts and emotions are like the clouds, and they're
Mhm.
gonna float by. And there's definitely a lot of that, that it's okay to feel this way. But I don't know if it's really gotten deeper into the body, and if there is that space, because I do find that even when there's a mindful moment in the classroom, it's very
Mm,
short lived.
mm,
It's 5 minutes max of
mhm,
kind of calm, peace, regulation. And then it's back to kind of chaotic, crazy, a lot of different dysregulation, movement, noise. Not that
mhm,
that's a bad thing, but
mhm.
it doesn't stay cohesive and calm enough to do some of that deeper work that I've noticed.
Yeah, and when you're saying that, I get this image, like when I'm imagining 25 to 30 dysregulated kids. I mean, that's like a mob, compared to, right? It's because the thing that's so interesting about co-regulation is that there's also co-dysregulation. And
Mm,
so, the nervous system will attune to the other nervous systems in the room. Or the other beings in the room. There's plant, like I love that you say like the neutral tones. And when we talked
mhm,
in your interview, you were talking about plants and making the inner environment much more naturally regulating.
mhm,
Same is true if there's a bunch of children screaming, then there's going to be co-dysregulation where the other children seeing the children screaming or hitting or throwing or whatever they're doing, it ignites a charge in them. And then they're going to respond with their trauma response, whether it's to freeze or flight or fight, whatever it is. So
mhm,
when you're saying this, I'm kind of thinking, I don't know how you can create these containers all throughout the day without a really good amount of adults in the room. Like
mhm.
30 kids to me needs like 4 to 6 adults. Like I can't imagine one doing all that work. What's that like for
Absolutely.
you? Like what, even in your
Yeah.
body, what's it like for you when that happens
it's
and it's
it's a
just you?
lot of charge. Like often I'll leave the classroom even after being there only for a few hours. Like yesterday I was only there for a half day, so I was only there for about 3 hours, and I felt like I had had 20 coffees. I was that jittery and that
Yeah.
amped up. Like it was middle school. So I find the older that they get, so they were about 12 years old. So the older that they get, they actually have more kids in the classroom, which is
Mm,
mind blowing.
mm,
And then the more energy they have, because they're adults, they're little adults, right? A lot of them are the same size as me.
mhm,
So yeah, I felt like I had 20 coffees, and it was very interesting too, because by the end of the day I had so much energy, and I was kind of feeding off what they were up to.
mm.
I was kind of being silly and bouncing, but again, it doesn't feel like myself,
Yeah.
because I'm used to pretty calm, relaxed, safe environment when I'm not there. So it's just really interesting to see the different dynamics. And you're right. I think if they had regulated adults and had a few more of those, it would be a total different story. And again, this is the public education system. So I'm also imagining that a lot of the private schools and the alternative methods, the kids come to school a lot more regulated too.
Mm. I can
Mhm.
see that my daughter's in a private Buddhist school, so
Wow.
it's kind of like the best it gets right now. It's the best I could
Mhm.
find that they actually have a somatic therapist that comes every week and like does embodiment movement and such. So
Wow.
so they're
Wow.
like my dream school right now, and I'm so lucky that she's able to take part in it. But it's so different because I think the maximum is 13 kids in a room, and so there's like 8 to 13 children in each room, and they spend like half the day outside. And there's all these moments of, let's say it's a 7 hour day, 3 hours is learning and then 3 hours is not learning. So
Mm,
there's this whole understanding of, for 3 hours, like we'll draw, we'll color, we'll walk, we'll think it, but it's not taking in information because they
mhm,
understand these cycles of the stimulus and regulation. And
mhm,
my daughter, I've never seen her come home more regulated from going somewhere ever in her life. She's just completely secure. And it's been amazing. And we just started the school 4 weeks ago, so it's very new. I'll see what it's like. But when you're talking about that, when you're saying the smaller schools, that's my direct experience, that the smaller the school, plus this awareness of somatics and
mm,
embodiment and relating to the self, these schools are popping up and it's so gorgeous. And when I think of the public education system, it's just as important because public education is the one that's most accessible. It's the
Mhm.
one that we can go to if you don't have money. It's the one that the majority of children are going to be in. And because of that, they're exposed to such a diversity of people and thinking and situations. And I think there needs to be even more self-relating because of the amount of children in the room. And so I guess I'm saying all this in agreement with you, because if I imagine a 12-year-old, by the time they're 12, we're thinking roughly 8 7 8 years, of
Mhm.
being already in a school system. Their bodies already have all these overcouplings, with
Yes.
teachers don't listen to me, or I have to hold my bladder, or I don't eat, or I zone out at 1 o'clock. So they're already in that structure, plus they're hormonal, so there's even more charge coming through. So that's
Mhm.
that's a lot to hold. And when you talk about bouncing and being jittery, it's like that's your experience of code dysregulating with them. And
Absolutely.
how could you not? I mean, that's intense. So I'll pause and just see what's coming up in your mind as I'm saying all this.
Well, first of all, that's amazing about your daughter's school. That is just fantastic. And so it sounds like such a beautiful, nurturing, incredible place for learning. I love that there's a somatic therapist. I've never heard of that before. So it's so neat to see all of these different forms of alternative education popping up. And,
Mhm.
I think that might be the future. I
Mhm.
actually went to Bali a few years ago and went to this green school. And it was, again, out in the forest, all eco-friendly buildings. And, they ring the gong twice a day for meditation. And they have a garden and they have a kitchen lab and they have all these different things where they're teaching the importance of growing our own food and cooking our own food and
Mhm.
being in nature. And so I think that that's really, really valuable. But you're right. I think that, yeah, I just don't know if the structure really allows for this type of work. And that's sort of what I'm toying with in my own personal practice in my own life is, do I stay in the system and try to create change, or do I do my own thing? And I'm really kind of dancing with both options at this moment. I have a lot of inquiries to start my own program and to do something like this in the next year or two. So I might just do that, because I'm not sure if they're ready, because I feel that the teachers need to be willing and open to doing this work on themselves first for it to really land, because all of these programs that I mentioned, zones of regulation, and we do this other program called Mind Up, where there's a bit of a meditation script and a chime. And
Mhm.
I find it doesn't land with the kids because it's not authentically practiced by the teachers.
That's right.
So I find that there's definitely teachers like myself that are doing the work, but there's few and far between. So I'm not sure if the real changes can happen until we start getting the teachers on board with this work. So I love that you're teaching this type of thing to adults, but
Mhm.
it would be so great to not have to wait until they're 20, 30, 40, 50 to learn this. So
Mhm.
it's a dichotomy. It's hard to know.
No, what you
Mhm.
just said there, I think is important. Again, when I teach my course and I do workshops, people will always say, "Oh my goodness, how can I get my kids to do this?" And I say exactly what you just said. I say you have to do it first, because when it's so part of your culture, when it becomes your culture, and when it becomes the natural state of your body, then you're just teaching through being. The way you
Mhm.
take a breath before you speak, the way you look into someone's eyes very slowly and pause, that other body gets to co-regulate to your pause. So not even teaching somatics to kids, but just being somatically aware
Mm.
around kids. They're sponges. They just start learning that exact same way of being. So I find it very encouraging. I feel like it'd be more practical maybe, or possible to start by teaching teachers, and then hopefully it trickles down into actual classroom settings. And I share that same
Exactly.
desire with you, to
Mhm.
develop certain kind of systems or workshops or something to show up to public schools and teach the teachers who want to do this
Exactly.
how to do this, right?
Yeah, I think that's really where the change lies. So I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to do some workshops and professional development opportunities in my district and neighboring districts. And I do work one-on-one with clients with holistic counseling and breathwork practices. And I do attract a lot of teachers that are on, medical leaves or stress leaves and things like that, because they're going through their own pains and their own traumas. And I mean, I've been there before too. I've only been a teacher for 5 years, and I've been on 2-3 different leaves already, trying to navigate my own experience. So yeah, I definitely think that it does start with the teachers and that embodied presence that they can bring to the table, and letting go of what they've been taught. And maybe it even looks like even university programs, because I know that when I went to university to become a teacher, it was hands down the most stressful year of my life, the most amazing, but one of the most stressful times. I was even in the hospital for a stomach ulcer at one point.
I believe it. I believe it.
It was that bad.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it might even start with educating at that level too.
I love that. That's such a great idea. If you're in college and you're in your program and let's say your last 2 years or something, it would be great to have this like appendage of how to self-relate while you're teaching children and learning about your own body and capacity. And I mean, how incredible. Then you go in just with that awareness and you can use it, whether the school has those setups or not. You can use that in your body.
You can use that in your own personal practice.
That's awesome.
Well,
So I'm
amazing.
so happy you came on here and talked to me. And I want to know how people can find your work and work with you if they want this kind of coaching or to hire you to do a program.
Absolutely. My website is devierose.com. So you'll find everything on there. And then my Instagram is Devie Rose. So just Google that and you'll find me.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much, Luis. And thank you for all of the work that you are doing in the world.
You're so welcome.